Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Ante, and I'm the Global Director for Young China Watchers. A very, very warm welcome to this year's China Conference, our fourth so far, and once again co-hosted with our longtime partner, the Lau China Institute of King's College London. In previous years, we convened in a beautiful conference hall at King's College, but this year I have the pleasure of a very large and global audience beaming in around the world from Beijing to Berlin. It is one of the few silver linings in our current situation. We have an incredible program today put together by our YCW London chapter and the global editorial team. For those of you new to our organization, Young China Watchers is a network of young professionals committed to facilitating constructive dialogue on China's past, present, and future role in the world. We see ourselves as fostering the next generation of China-focused thought leaders, such as yourselves, many of you who have carved out careers studying and working in and on China. Young China Watchers is active in 10 cities across Asia, Europe, and the US, along with a global editorial team of writers and content creators contributing from around the globe. Today's conference is the fourth in a series that began in 2017. The purpose has always been to dissect and debate a topical and thought-provoking theme through a mix of interdisciplinary panels comprised of not only the seasoned China experts, but also talented and up-and-coming thinkers, as we call Young China Watchers. So debate and actions around China have never been more divisive and partisan in a period of destabilizing global power shifts. I know that Kerry will speak to this in his subsequent remarks. Given the often understated complexity of China's role played in these turning points, we posed the theme of this year's conference, the 2020s, China's decade. We have three panels today debating this with different lenses. Panel one, we're focusing on geopolitics and journalism with the theme India and China, the other great power rivalry. Panel two shifts to tech ventures in the 2020s, specifically considering China and the shifting global tech, business, and financial landscape. Panel three reflects on global narratives in the 2020s, specifically covering China's power over popular culture at home and abroad. I'm also delighted that we are joined by two distinguished keynote speakers. In London this morning, we'll be joined by Cindy Yu, who is the broadcast editor for The Spectator and host of the excellent Chinese Whispers podcast. And at the close of the conference, Dr. Yuquan Huang will close the session. He's the former China director for the World Bank and currently a senior fellow at the Carnegie Asia program. I wish you all a productive and constructive conference. And I want to thank you very warmly for joining us today. A special note to our YCW community and friends in London and UK. I know it's a second lockdown, but I hope that today's conference will be a kind of bright spark for the day for you. And so it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kerry Brown, Professor of China Studies and Director of Lau China Institute, to say a few words of welcome from the KCL side. Over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Suan, and thank you for the organizers of this event. It's always been great to partner you. The Young China Watchers is a really important organization. I've had a very happy collaboration now for many years. And as an international group of young professionals engaging with China, your work could not be more important. Over the last 3 days, no doubt you have been watching from various vantage points, as I have the unrolling of the great soap opera in America. There's a Taiwanese expression, a bad soap opera never comes to an end. And so I think we are seeing this sort of extraordinary situation of someone who has won an election not being able to say they won an election. That is going to frame, I guess, the comments that I'll make about the importance of the work of communication that you're doing, because by accident more than design, but with a sort of inevitability, engagement with China, understanding of China and the role that China has in the world has never been more important. And therefore, I think what I wanted to really kind of set clearly today is that the institution like mine is in London at a major university, is sort of kind of under all sorts of pressures now to look in many different ways. I don't think a Biden presidency is going to at all alleviate those, because the basic fact is after the public health issues that are ongoing in some places now over the last year, and because of things that were already well underway, the fact of China as a place with radically different values and different history, different viewpoint, um, the fact that this is going to be probably the world's biggest economy sooner rather than later is one that's not going to go away. And the important thing now is to make the right interpretation of what that means. Broadly, I suppose it means that we have to kind of come to some consensus over what kind of problem China is. I'm not going to dispute that it is a problem, but then everything's a problem. So what kind of problem is it? To me, I think that there is a clash between two radically different views within our own communities, not in China, but in our own communities. One is that China is somehow a radical proselytizer that is coming to change us, to make us like it. Another is that it is a different kind of problem, maybe a more self-centered power that has a sort of almost Hobbesian anarchic view of what the world should be. And I think that, well, of course, my kind of proclivity would be to the latter. I don't think that China has a template of making Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics a global ideology. But of course, it would suit it if there were certain parts of its thinking that were shared by others, particularly in Latin America and Africa. And that is sometimes something that happens, though how deeply, who knows. Setting out this framework is urgent. It's not something that we have time to do because in many communities, there isn't the level of knowledge of China. Why should there be? It's until recently been a relatively marginal issue, but now it is absolutely central. And the kind of work that you're all doing, I think, is really, really critical. In a sense, you're ambassadors, not really for a place, but you're ambassadors for an attitude. And that is an attitude led by empirical analysis, by understanding, by cogent thought, and by basically just standing back and trying to make sense of what we are seeing happen in the global structural change. The reality of China, of a fifth of humanity, a fifth of global GDP, likely to go up to a third at some point, sorry, a quarter at some point, this is not going to go away. It's going to be a part of our world. We say that we want to decouple, but in fact, did we ever couple in the first place? I mean, it seems that we are thinking often in our policy circles of options, which in fact were never really the options that were available. We have a lack, I suppose, of realism. In the previous conferences for the Young China Watchers, I think what I've been struck by is the very strong realism of those that contributed. When we talked about things like the Belt and Road, there are parts of the network that Young China Watchers embraces who really do look at exactly what's happening in different places and in different areas, and are therefore able to contribute to this absolutely critical, huge, huge issue before us. Today, you have many excellent speakers who will be able to speak to that. There are people participating, all of you, with really, really important ideas and contributions. And I suppose like the final thing I would say is that for an institution like mine, at a new university in the centre of London, in a global capital, in a kind of time like this, we are really, really in the firing line. We are put under all sorts of pressures about what universities' relationships with China are, what the role of self-censorship is, what is our attitude to human rights and values issues, where do we stand, for instance, on all sorts of very thorny and difficult issues. Even before we open our mouths, we are political. If we set out things on social media about attitudes towards China, we are going to attract sometimes some pretty bizarre attitudes back. We are public in ways which we never really expected. Sinology has been a little bit of a kind of discrete sideshow, really. It's been tucked away. Usually it's been at universities like Cambridge or Oxford that have been able to kind of hold these kind of quite esoteric sort of study areas. And now China Studies is right in the center, in the thick of things, as it were. And therefore, it is really, really crucial that we have networks like the Young China Watchers and others, and work in partnership with them, in order to undertake the public engagement and to make the connection between those who do try and study China empirically and those who are engaged in different areas. It's not going to help if this area, this study area, is politicized and becomes like it did in the 1950s during the McCarthyite era. We've seen distressing issues in Australia of academics who've been hounded for saying things that were contrarian about China, being accused of being funded by China and belonging to the Chinese Communist Party. We've even seen a senator in Australia berate people of Chinese heritage, but who are absolutely Australian because of their supposed disloyalty. These are things that we have to have the courage to speak to, even though we may be shouted down, because they're things that all of us could contribute to in a more meaningful way. The political environment in which we operate in China studies now is at an absolute crucial moment. And it is no longer possible to simply say that we just study something and leave it at that. In fact, when we study something and come to conclusions, they're in an environment in which the conclusions could be radically important and hugely important for policy decisions and for that final huge issue of what kind of problem we in our societies think China and its role in the world is, for now into the future. Thank you very much.